Hey guys, there's going to be several little parts. I don't want to keep the videos very long of World War II. And I'm not going to do it in PowerPoint. I downloaded it to a PDF so I can just easily slide and we can see if you can see it's larger on your screen. So once again, I have my book with me, so I'm going to be looking down at my book and just talking to y'all basically. But let's start with World War II. Now, World War II started, of course, after World War One, but let's get caught up. I talked y'all about World War One in the previous video, but after World War One, we had a time of prosperity, and we called it the Roaring Twenties. And during that time, people were buying things that they haven't bought before. People were purchasing things on credit, which meant that they promised to pay it back, and different things were happening because of all this spending, that also allowed certain people to become very rich and different. um, You have like the Vanderbilts, the Carnegie, Andrew Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Cornelius Vanderbilt. You have John D. Rockefeller. All these men became very rich during this time. They formed what we call monopolies, and you should remember that stuff. Also, because of all this stuff buying on credit and things, people didn't necessarily have the money. So what happened was in October of 29, you had the stock market crash. That stock market crash caused a lot of people to lose money, which then created a time period called the Great Depression. The Great Depression lasted a very long time. And during that time, a man by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected president, and he helped get us out of that Great Depression. And surprising enough, the one thing that got us out of the Great Depression was the start of World War II. So let's get started. Sorry. Okay, some vocabulary. Aircraft carrier, you should be familiar for that. It's a military ship that carries aircraft, it deploys and recovers them. Atomic bomb, which is a nuclear weapon with enormous amount of energy that is released by nuclear fission. A concentration camp is basically a prison or work camp. A dictator is a leader who has total authority to rule. Fascism is a type of political system which power is given to the dictator, and basically every freedom that individuals have is taken away. An internment camp is a army-style settlement in which Japanese Americans were forced to live after Pearl Harbor. Mobilize means to get ready to move. Um, Racism, you should know what racism is through the Civil War and stuff, but basically it's discrimination based on someone's belief that one race is superior over the other. Now, the calm before the storm, and this is a common phrase that a lot of people use, and if you think about the weather, it's usually very calm before a bad storm happens, and this is basically what it is. So this is a picture of Adolf Hitler, who is the storm in itself, walking up with his USS, yes, SS. Sorry, I did not mean to say that. With his SS soldiers. Okay, the Great Depression in the United States really affected the entire world. Germany was pressured by the Allied forces because of the Versailles Treaty to pay for the cost. Many Germans were angry at this demand that it placed on the country. Their country went into a depression. And when that happens, the government loses a bit of power and it's very weak. And when you have a weak government, that's when another type or style of government tries to come in and tries to take over. That's exactly what happened in Germany. You have what's called the National Socialist Party, which would later become known as the Nazi Party, came to power in Germany post World War I during their time of depression. And Adolf Hitler, who served in World War I, became fascinated by the National Socialist Party and became part of it. When he was there, he actually he realized he was very good at giving speeches. He was a very good orator. And if you do any research and watch him, you can say he's very animated when he gives speeches. But anyway, Adolf Hitler was a young artist and laborer, became the new leader of the German government. Later, when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, he led his country with a dictatorship. A dictatorship happens when one person is in total control of the government. Usually, a dictator leads the government in a cruel and harsh manner. So basically, when he first came to power, he did it in a way that people were hopeful. But then over time, he made little bitty changes, took away power from people, and he did it very quietly and very in little small increments, and they didn't know what was going on. The German people listened to Hitler because he told them that they were, this goes back to nationalism, were the best people out there. And then the entire race, German people, were the supreme race. It made them feel very powerful and important. Hitler needed a group for the German people to blame for all the problems. Hitler did not want the Germans to think that they were the ones at fault, so he blamed a certain group of people. And this is when the racism comes into play. He ended up blaming the Jewish people. Hitler blamed Germany's loss in World War I on the Jews. He blamed the Depression on the Jews and everything wrong in Europe. Hitler blamed the Jewish people. Many Jewish people fled Germany with this attitude towards them became apparent. Hitler blamed the Jews for all the problems that were in Germany. And he knew he had to do this because if he wanted to make Germany a world power again, he needed the German people behind him. So Hitler rebuilt factories. These factories made war supplies, and the treaty from the World War I did not stop Hitler from building up his army. And what that means is, as part of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany had to give up all military rights, which meant that they couldn't have a military, basically. And these factories were not allowed to make any military supplies. So he did all this against the Treaty of Versailles. Now, in 1938, Hitler began rebuilding the German army. He started the Hitler Youth Program so that very young boys and teens could receive military training. By the age of 10, boys were required to join. You had no choice. Many of these young men grew up to join the German army. These boys wore a symbol of the Nazi Party on their uniform, and this symbol became known as the swastika, and that's what it is. This actually is an original symbol from 3,000 years ago, which meant peace, and Hitler took it and he distorted it to what he wanted it to look like. This is a very vile symbol. It is very disrespectful, and it is something that you should not use unless you're using it in a way that is like I am right now, showing it to you. You should not draw this because it's a bad thing. Sorry. All right, now let's put me over here. All right, so the day after Roosevelt took the oath of office to be the president of the United States, the Nazi Reichstag gave Adolf Hitler absolute control of Germany. Hitler had campaigned spewing anti-Semitic, which means anti-Jewish rhetoric, and vowing to rebuild a strong Germany. Now, Hitler just didn't rise to power from being nobody to this person. He actually kind of wormed his way into the German government and worked his way up, getting to become the kind of like the confidant of the ruler of Germany. But then he mysteriously, they could never explain how he passed away. And then Hitler took his place. So I'll let that just settle in. Now, Hitler was, as I said, an artist. He loved in anything that had to do with art. So he very much so looked up to Benito Mussolini, who was a leader of Germany. Germany, sorry, he was the leader of the fascist government in Italy. So they actually became allies in itself. So when Italy became a fascist government, they were very prideful people, and very few people had control. And basically, Mussolini was the dictator that led the people. He was a very evil man, also, and he caused a lot of trouble and a lot of pain for people. Now, following when Hitler and Mussolini formed the Roman Berlin Axis, an alliance so named because the leaders believed that there was a line that connected their capitals. The capital of Italy was Rome, the capital of Germany is Berlin. So basically, it's an axis, like the axis of the earth, you have a straight line going through. Later in 1936, Hitler marched troops into the Rhineland, which was an area that he was not supposed to go post Treaty of Versailles. And he thought that it was going to cause a lot of trouble, but actually they were able just to march in there into the Treaty of Versailles. And then a few months later, fascist General Francisco Franco launched an attempt to overthrow an established loyalist government in Spain. Franco received generous support from both Hitler and Mussolini. So basically, the more people that Hitler supported, the more that he thought they would come back and help him later on. All right, so just to give you an idea of the different types of government that were over in Europe at the time, you have what's called a fascist government, and that's the government that is base of power, just basically has one leader, and that one leader controls everything. It started after World War One. Nazism is a political belief associated with the German Party in Germany. It also started in Germany in World War One, after World War One. And then you have what's called totalitarianism. It's a big word, but it's totalitarianism. It's when a government type that permits no individual freedom. Basically, this was in Asia from around 4 BC, and then it moved to Europe in, that doesn't make any sense, to Europe in the 19th century. So basically, the totalitarianism that is the government has total control and citizens have very little, if any, freedoms. Okay, the Axis powers. This is one part of the two sides. You have the Axis powers, which are going to be one side, and then on the other side, we have the Allied powers. So, forming of the Axis powers, you have an alliance began in 1936 when we remember when Germany and Italy first signed that agreement. Now, it was called the Roman German Axis, or as we also know it as the Rome Berlin Axis. After this treaty was signed, Italian dictator Mussolini used the term Axis to refer to their alliance, so Axis powers. Shortly after this, on November 25th, 1936, Japan and Germany signed the Anti-Cominternal Pact. I don't think that's what the name is, but I will look it up real quick. 36. Don't have that one. Okay, don't have that one. But basically, a Cominternment Pact, I'll have to look that one up, which was a treaty against communism. So basically, Germany and Japan, neither one of them wanted the whole communist thing. An even stronger alliance that was signed between Germany and Italy on May 22nd, 1939, was called the Pact of Steel, and steel is a very strong metal. This treaty would later be called the Tripartite Pact when Japan signed it September 27th, 1940. Tripartite means three. So now these are your three main powers that were allies for the Axis party. Okay, so your Axis powers were the countries of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Germany's leader was Adolf Hitler, and he was a Nazi uh, supporter. What he wanted was expansion and power. He wanted more power, he wanted more places, because the more land you have, the more power you have. Italy, Benito Mussolini, he was a fascist and a dictator. He also wanted expansion and power. And then Japan, Emperor Hirohito, and he was militarism, and he also wanted expansion and power. So that's one. Those are two things they all had in common, was the fact that they wanted power and they wanted to expand their reach. Now here are pictures of the leaders. You have Adolf Hitler. You have Benito Mussolini, and then you have Hirohito. All these men were military men. Now, the Allied powers, World War II was fought between two major groups. They became known as the Axis. You have the Axis powers, which were Japan, Germany, and like Italy. And then you had the Allied powers. The major Allied powers were Britain, France, Russia, and the United States, which joined in 1941. The Allies formed mostly as a defense against the attacks of the Axis powers. The original members of the Allies included Great Britain, France, and Poland. When Germany invaded Poland, Great Britain and France declared war on them because both Great Britain and France had relations or an alliance with Poland. And when Hitler invaded Poland, they had to come to the aid of Poland. Now, late entries into the war, Russia became an ally. At the start of World War II, Russia and Germany were friends because during that time, their leaders got together and they remained friends. However, the 22nd of June, 1941, Hitler ordered a surprise attack. He kind of used that relationship to fool them. Russia then, after that, became an enemy of the Axis powers and joined the Allied group. U.S. enters the war. The U.S. entered the war about 2 years after it started. The United States had hoped to remain neutral during the war because they didn't want to go back. They were in World War I. You don't want to go to war if you don't have to. However, the U.S. was attacked by surprise when they attacked Pearl Harbor, which was in Hawaii. The attack united our country against the Axis powers, and it turned the tide in World War II in favor of the Allies. Okay, so here's your Allied powers. These are the major. There were several more, but these were just the major ones. You have Great Britain, the United States, Russia, and France. You have Great Britain, which was led by Winston Churchill, who was a former. He served in World War I, and he was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And they believe in what's called a constitutional monarchy, which basically is they have a king or queen. Right now, they have a queen, and that person's kind of like a figurehead. But then they have other people that make the decisions. They have like what we refer to as our Congress. The United States of America, which was led by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We have what many people call a constitutional democracy. Russia, which was led by Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was a military man himself. He served in World War I. He was a communist, and he was part of a dictatorship. France, Charles de Gaulle, I probably really messed up his name. Gaulle. He was the leader of Free France. This was a democratic republic, but was in exile for most of the war. But France did play a big part. All right, now this map, I want to talk about it in the next video. So that was basically a video about the Axis and the Allied powers and the different leaders of the group, because what I was looking at, the standard, because I did this by standards when I taught, it was basically compare and contrast the rise of the different governments of the leaders. So the main thing you needed to get out of this video, the main thing we need to know, is what were the goals of the leader of the Axis power during World War I. Their goals, remember, if we look back, the goals of their reason for fighting is because all three of them wanted to expand their reach and they wanted more power. That was the main reason behind this video. Now, the next video, we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? The different stories and stuff, but I'm also going to be putting up a video. Basically, it's a map, and it's going to show the different sides and how the whole war progressed. So, hope this video helps, and I will be posting more later. Good night.